That was then. This is now. The old Hotomont streetcar route runs through 7 neighborhoods, and there are plans and hopes for more than a good cleanup.
Would you like a Greenway along the Hotomont tracks? And we've heard an overwhelming yes.
A story of a favorite neighborhood hangout and some customers who just wouldn't let it close.
We wanted our place back, and we were willing to put in some money and labor to make it happen.
And while Gaslight Square is long gone, the legend lives on. We remember the late Fran Landesman's last visit to St. Louis. She didn't just know the legend of Gaslight Square, she was part of it.
Why has God been this good to me? Knock wood. It's a job to know.
It's all next on Living St. Louis. I'm Jim Kircher, and this used to be an important transportation artery in the city of St. Louis. Now it looks like just a big alley, but that's because it was built for streetcars. The Hotomont line ran here. That was years ago, decades ago. What about now? Well, that's why we're here. That's why they're here. It was a Saturday morning in August when teams of volunteers went out to clean up and spruce up 3.5 miles of something that served a very different purpose in the days when streetcars were crisscrossing the city. But the Hotomont line, that was different. You got on a Hotomont car downtown. Like other trams, it ran on tracks in the middle of the street. But just west of Vandeventer, it turned onto its own right-of-way and headed to the city limits, and then up to the distinctive Wellston Loop station. And while there are plenty of people who remember the era of the streetcar, many, if not most of the volunteers who showed up for the cleanup were way too young to remember. And anyway, they weren't here because of nostalgia. The old Hotomont route runs through 7 city neighborhoods, neglected, and it is a detriment when it could be an asset. Judith Arnold is with Neighborhoods United for Change, just one of the groups involved in the Hotomont project.
The reason why this is important is because it's an infrastructure type of project. The Hotomont track has been used as dumping grounds of furniture and other types of debris. We need to clean it up because we want to become part of the Greenway system, which will connect to Shoto and to the St. Vincent Greenway.
A lot of people came. Maybe 200 showed up for this. Aldermen were there, Mayor Cruson came, Congressman Lacey Clay brought a group of his interns to join in the cleanup. And Great Rivers Greenway has a plan that goes way beyond this one-day blitz.
So Great Rivers Greenway, over the last year or so, has been talking to community members asking, would you like a Greenway along the Hotomont tracks? And we've heard an overwhelming yes, and there are some big issues that need to be addressed to make this a place where people want to be. So one of those is cleaning up the litter and debris. So thank you to each of you for helping to make that happen today.
Just helping out the community. Born here in this community, raised in this community. My church is in this community. Want to help out. Just want to help out.
I mean, everybody's got to do their part. Everybody's got to help pick up, clean up, make the world a better place, and that's what we're out here trying to do today.
I'm here to help clean up the neighborhood as well. And I am a part of this neighborhood. I'm Covenant Blue Grand Center.
Yeah, so how important is this? Well, first of all, explain to me what this place is, I mean, in your own neighborhood. Is it a problem? Is it something you'd like to see fixed?
Most definitely fixed, to, keep us in the neighborhood so that we can, have a place to come to, mingle and get to know those in our community.
Yeah. Has there been some problems here?
Vandalism and what have you, yes, there has. People just coming, dumping, when the neighborhood is, not kept up, it gives those that wants to dump, feel like that they can just come and, dump, and we don't want that in our neighborhoods.
The Hotomont line was the last streetcar line running in the city of St. Louis. Its final day of operation was in May of 1966, and a lot of streetcar enthusiasts were out with their home movie cameras. For a while, bi-state buses ran on the paved right-of-way, but that came to an end, and the Hotomont line became something you didn't want in your backyard. Here and there, of course, you still can find the remnants of the old streetcar tracks, the ones that are coming up above the pavement. Some people like this kind of thing. I'm one of them. But a more interesting remnant of that time is this place back here. Grocery store, hot dog stand. I mean, when this was a streetcar stop, that place must have been really hopping. Some of those old streetcar stops were some of the busiest places in the city. People coming home from work, kids from school, shoppers from downtown or the Wellston Loop. It was part of the local economy, and the Hotomont line could be again in a different way. A well-designed and maintained Greenway would be much more than a neighborhood improvement. It could be welcoming to new residents and investors.
Well, for the community, I grew up around this neighborhood. It was distressed as I was growing up, but I seen a vision when I was younger. I own property around here now, and you can see it's up and coming. And I was just excited about it with my sons being out here as well. I wanted to show them how to help with the community and keep the community up and keep it striving and dream big,
In this age of pathways for biking, running, strolling, a Greenway seems like a no-brainer, but it would take time and money and buy-in from those who live in the neighborhoods. Great Rivers Greenway has already laid some of the groundwork for the transformation by going door to door to see what residents want.
They've been asked for input. 95% of them want to see a Greenway through the Hotomont tracks, but there's much more. Designs, plans, surveys.
So this year we're doing a technical study of the tracks, looking at utilities, property lines, and next year we'll start a planning process with the community members, with you, to help determine what this space could be, what you want to see, how you want to use the Hotomont tracks as a Greenway in the future.
There are, of course, other plans for other greenways and trails in the city and the county. And the Hotomont project, if it happens at all, is somewhere down the line. But for the people who live in the 7 connected neighborhoods, well, they want it cleaner, they want it safer, and this is a good start. The folks who live around here are worrying about issues today and thinking about the future. But the story of the old Hotomont line actually goes back nearly 150 years. I'll save that bit of history for the end of the program. Our next story by Paul Shankman is about another neighborhood and another group of neighbors who've gotten together to save something very important to them.
In the chef eat chef world of independent restaurants, most flame out in their first year. The West End Grill and Pub had made it 10 years, but at the beginning of 2019, its owners announced the end. January 12th was last call.
Well, there was just kind of a slow burn over time.
We were really stunned and shattered, which may seem extreme, but we'd been coming here like once a week for years and years.
We were here minimum once a week, usually 2 or 3 times a week.
My husband always says he loved walking in here because by the time we get to the table, his Doers on the Rocks with a Twist is already there.
Regular customers knew the West End Grill and Pub as WeGap for short. And to make a long story short, the problem was too many regulars were becoming irregulars.
If you read any newspaper, you'll see 1 million restaurants opening every month. And so that takes away, even that takes away 5 patrons a day, you'll run out of cash.
And they did. But then they were offered something off the menu.
We found ourselves just feeling really sad.
We wanted our place back, and we were willing to put in some money and labor to make it happen.
People living in the Central West End neighborhood surrounding We Gap decided they had to do something to save it.
The neighbors started to get together and said, hey, can we meet on a Sunday? We have an idea.
The plan they cooked up was simple: turn We Gap fanatics into We Gap investors, with each person truly putting their money where their mouth is.
And so one Sunday it was one neighbor, and then 2 Sundays later it was 5.
We Gap's lucky number turned out to be 13, with each investor becoming an equal partner.
It's hard not to find it touching when you're here, you know, scrubbing and selling things on Craigslist, and people come in and are like, wait a minute, we love this place, we can't live without it.
While it certainly is a financial investment, it feels also like a social investment because we made the commitment to come here frequently and to talk to our friends about it and to bring friends here.
If you can get 50 people in here and 5 of those people become kind of regulars, that's success.
Of the 4 original owners, only 2 decided to stay for the second act. One is William Roth. The other is Neil Costello.
Frankly, I sort of had one foot out the door already and thinking about a next career move. And a little bit relieved, you know, because there was a lot of stress over the last few months that we were open, worrying about bills and employees getting paid and whatnot. And so it was a little bit of like, uh-oh, I'm getting dragged back into this feeling. But that didn't last too long. Once we got things going, then it was more of an excitement and a challenge.
On April 12th, exactly 3 months after it closed, they opened the new We Gap, which pretty much looks like the old We Gap.
No, I don't think you have to be something different. They don't have to be new and improved, just improved, maybe.
The neighbors who rescued We Gap did more than just help close the financial gap. Many of them spent hours here repainting the place. A few donated some new artwork. They even reupholstered the chairs.
We're not in so deep that we're scared. It was more of an emotional thing.
Which probably makes it worse.
In a way, yes. In a way, yeah, because you find yourself thinking about stuff like, oh my gosh, I gotta go over there and sweep out the alley. And oh my gosh, you know, I'm gonna buy ashtrays to put out in the alley so people aren't throwing their cigarette butts out. Oh, that looks terrible. Oh, with this, and yeah, you do. Yeah, why isn't the stall door in the men's room closing, you know?
As a neighborhood bar and grill, We Gap is fairly conventional. But its business model has always had a dramatic side.
All I know are my orders.
It all began in 2006 when William Roth bought a vacant building with a rotting roof in the 300 block of North Boyle. He turned half of it into a performance space for a theater company he was starting, the St. Louis Actors Studio.
I built the Gaslight Theater and was looking for a way to attract more patrons to the theater, and I've been an actor long enough to know that if they were eating across town and coming to your show, they might have a second martini and skip your show till next weekend or skip it entirely.
And that's when Roth, joined by 3 other partners, turned the other half of the building into the West End Grill and Pub, with a draped doorway in between the theater and the dining room.
St. Louisans are flocking to this new mecca of nightlife in ever-increasing numbers.
The Gaslight Theater takes its name from long-gone Gaslight Square, which used to be just around the corner, and now lives on in We Gap's decor. A subtle reminder that even something beloved can burn bright, but then quickly burn out.
It won't be long when we'll have been around longer than Gaslight Square.
To drum up new business for what is essentially an old business, We Gap is taking a more creative approach, adding theme nights, including a jazz series, a trivia night, and a monthly wine tasting dinner.
Making your way in the world today takes everything you've got.
In the end, it's not the daily specials that make a place like this special. It's the feeling you get when you go there, thanks to the people you find when you get there.
Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name.
This really became our cheers. because when you walked in, you would see people that you knew from the neighborhood, and the person behind the bar would yell out your name and say hi.
And they're always glad you came.
You can never run and hide from this business. And once it's in your blood, it's in your blood.
When I walk by these poor old buildings with no roofs 13 years ago, I felt good about it, and the feeling gets better every day.
You wanna go where everybody knows your name.
This block of Olive was the heart of Gaslight Square, the entertainment district. For years, the old buildings were dilapidated and abandoned, and finally they were torn down, replaced by this residential development about 15 years ago. But the Gaslight Square story lives on. Here's another piece of old film, the Olive streetcar heading right through the entertainment district. And we're using it to introduce our story from about 10 years ago, about the return of one of the bright young things of Gaslight Square. She was much older, but still a piece of work. In the fall of 2008, people came to the Gaslight Theatre on Boyle for a cabaret performance by Fran Landesman, who had flown in from London. For some, she was an old friend. For others, something of a legend.
Shucks. It's wonderful to be back here in St. Louis, and I hope we're all going to have a good time.
It wasn't so much the act, her poems, songs, and sassy banter, but the woman herself who was the big draw. Because Fran Landesman played a central role in one of the city's most interesting, creative, and hippest periods, the era of Gaslight Square.
It's up a thrill, but after that, it's all downhill.
It's a well-known story, the rise in the 1950s of the vibrant area of bars, clubs, cafes, antique stores, and of course, its eventual decline. It all took place around Olive and Boyle, but its roots were in post-war Greenwich Village. St. Louis native Jay Landesman had gone to New York and was putting out a literary magazine featuring the works of Beat Generation writers like Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg. He met and married Fran, a well-to-do Manhattan girl, who couldn't have been thrilled when she found out that Jay wanted to leave the New York scene and move back to St. Louis.
I thought, well, I could always turn around and go home. And Jay's brother Fred, who was pretty smart, said that he decided to open a bar to keep me from getting bored and going back to New York, and I might well have, which I might have done.
And that's the Crystal Palace.
But the Crystal Palace was a wonderful toy.
The Crystal Palace wasn't just any bar or club, because Jay and Fred Landesman knew talent when they saw it, and they brought in performers who would go on to big national success: Woody Allen, Barbra Streisand, Lenny Bruce, and a couple of guys in their 20s with a nightclub act of folk music and comedy, the Smothers Brothers.
There was about a 5-6 year period, a shining moment there in St. Louis. And
Tommy Smothers was interviewed for a local documentary about the heyday of Gaslight Square.
The Landesmans were the impresarios. They were the ones, they kind of, and Fred, they kind of held court all over Gaslight Square. I mean, everybody there was into something. I mean, either a writer or a poet or something, and they were just full of interesting people.
And Fran was in the midst of it all. And she admits she really didn't have much to do with the success of the Crystal Palace. It was more the other way around.
But once we opened that bar, and I met Tommy Wolfe, who got me started on the whole songwriting career, I blossomed. And then also bringing Lenny Bruce and baby Barbra Streisand and all those people. And you know, when somebody said, you may think Fran is a bit of a name dropper, but she really didn't know all those people. I mean, I really did know them.
In 1959, Jay Landesman staged a musical at the Crystal Palace based on his life in New York, The Nervous Set. Tommy Wolfe wrote the music and Fran wrote the lyrics. It went to Broadway, but didn't do very well. The Nervous Set was staged again in St. Louis in 2004 by New Line Theater.
Yeah, that job is beginning to interfere with our fun line.
they started doing the show, and at the same time, other people started recording Tommy and Fran's songs. And there was a couple at the time, Jackie and Roy, I think, who were really famous music performers. And they were recording some of Tommy and Fran's songs. And they were becoming, some of them, standards. Most notably, the big ballad of the show, Spring Can Really Hang You Up the Most.
I walk in the park, just a few lonely hours. Spring can really hang you up the most.
The song was actually inspired by T.S. Eliot, whose boyhood home in the Central West End was just across the street from Jay and Fran's.
I love poetry, and I would think of those words of Eliot's, April is the cruelest month, mixing memory with desire. And when I got to know Tommy Wolfe, and I listened to all that hip talk, I thought, the way they would say that, April is the cruelest month, they would say, spring can really hang you up the most, man.
In some ways, Gaslight Square became a victim of its own success. It became more commercial and touristy, less bohemian, less edgy. There were crime issues, real or perceived, and overall urban decline. And people just weren't coming to Gaslight Square like they once did. And the Landesmans moved on to London. So when Fran returned to St. Louis, so did her friends, old neighbors, and fans of those days gone by.
Absolutely wild. We all lived in Westminster. There was Fred Landesman, Jay and Fran, Hirschfelds, and Paul Landesman. All of us had houses there, and it was just like one big open house and party. Very creative, very inventive, very exciting.
Well, this is a part of Gaslight Square that I missed, so I thought this isn't going to happen probably too often again, so I thought this would be a good time to kind of complete what I missed.
What I felt she brought was an excitement.
Singer Jeannie Trevor was herself a popular Gaslight Square performer.
Ideas and people and music, a new music.
Do you sing her lyrics today?
I sing her lyrics. In fact, I have a CD which I'm going to give her with one of her #1 hit songs, Spring Can Hang You Up the Most, on it.
And in from New York, Broadway producer Rocco Landesman, Fran's nephew, Fred's son. He grew up in that Gaslight Square crowd. Would there have been a Gaslight Square without them, do you think?
Without the Landesmans, I don't think so. No, the Crystal Palace, I thought, was the center of it.
Yeah.
I don't think it ever made any money. It was just a place for them to hang out and invite interesting friends.
That's what Lenny said when he came. The motivation for working is bread, baby.
People still ask her about Lenny Bruce and Jack Kerouac, and she's happy to tell the stories. But Fran Landesman didn't come to St. Louis to revive or relive the past.
Guitars, my son, Miles Davis Landesman.
Performing is something she only started a few years ago in a London club. She really can't sing very well. She leaves that to the real singers, but mostly does some talk singing and sometimes just recites her poems, which can be poignant, funny, and risque.
Look what I'm doing, and I enjoy it. Getting on stage is like some sort of great medicine. In England, they call it Dr. Footlights performing, because no matter how ill or miserable you might be, when you stand up in front of that audience, the adrenaline rush just cures you of anything that might ail you.
Greenwich Village, Gaslight Square, London in the 60s, songwriter, cabaret performer. This has been one amazing life, especially for someone who started out with no real plans.
In my wildest dreams, it's exactly what I would have wanted. It's as though God looked down and decided to design a future for me that would give me everything that I ever wanted. And I keep thinking, why? I mean, I'm not all that kind or considerate, or I'm a bit self-centered, a bit selfish. Why has God been this good to me? Knock wood. It's a job to know. Well, I'm just going to keep on doing what I'm doing.
And she did, until her death in 2011 at the age of 83. Still the exuberant nonconformist doing her own thing, still embodying the spirit of Gaslight Square.
I'm given to smoking and swearing. My lyrics upset decent folk, but my motto is always be daring and piss off. If you can't take a joke,
Finally, back where we started with the story and really the history of the Hotomont line. Maybe you were wondering, as I was, how and why this came about in the first place, why there were streetcar tracks going between people's backyards. Simple answer, the tracks were here first. A lot of streetcars did not run in the streets, especially when they got out of the city and served suburbs or even distant cities as interurban lines. The streetcar enthusiasts have plenty of old film showing trams heading to Creve Coeur or to Kirkwood. And the Hotomont line actually started out as a narrow-gauge steam railroad in 1875 when there wasn't much out here. It went all the way to Florissant and was later electrified. So it was actually the city that built up around and along the tracks. The houses were built facing their neighboring streets, and the property backed up to the tracks. For residents, of course, the sights and sounds of streetcars, that was just part of their lives. And for passengers, well, it made for an interesting ride. Years ago, former Channel 2 reporter and anchor Don Johnson fondly recalled his own childhood trips on the Hotomont streetcars.
You went through people's backyards, and you saw the backyards of their lives, so to speak. And of course, in those days, a lot of activities were in the backyard. So you'd look over and you would see so-and-so doing the wash, or such and such playing with his kid, or some guy working on an old beat-up car, which may not seem interesting now, but it was like, it was an ongoing movie as you looked out the window, because you would pass these things and you would see each person's life seemed so different based on what you saw in that backyard.
I want to thank Mark Goldfeder for sharing his collection of streetcar films, along with the other longtime streetcar enthusiasts. This is the crowd that showed up on May 21st of 1966 to be part of the final run of the last streetcar line, and who many years ago preserved the images of what they knew was soon to be a bygone era. And that's Living St. Louis. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jim Kircher, and we'll see you next time.
Living St. Louis is made possible by the support of the Mary Rankin Jordan and Eddie A. Jordan Charitable Foundation and by the members of 9 Network.